This video goes over Phase Plant's sampler module and all of its features and controls. I will select into Phase Plant's generator section and select Sampler. This sample player is a generator module which allows you to use sampled audio as a building block for a sound in Phase Plant's generator section. This sampler module plays sampled audio files. Sampled as in digital audio files. In other words, samples. You can load any sample you like into the sampler module by browsing for it and selecting it. Phase Plant comes bundled with a library of samples. In the lower right corner, you can select in the drop-down menu and browse for samples that are in Kiloheart's library. Kiloheart's factory samples are stored in the FLAC format, but you can also load uncompressed WAV and AIFF files. The digital audio files you can use with the sampler module don't have to come from Kiloheart's factory samples. They can be from any digital recording you may have, including those you create yourself, as long as they are the supported file type. You can drag these digital audio files from their stored location into the sampler module or add the folder in Phase Plant's browser and access them from there. To add the folder in the browser window, select at the bottom Add Location. Then select the folder on your computer where you have your samples stored. Once this folder is added to the browser, you can navigate to that folder through Phase Plant's browser and select the sample to be loaded from there. Once a sample is loaded into the sampler module, you can play the sample by playing a note via MIDI. Phase Plant's sample player will play the sample at different speeds depending on the note being played. This is how sample players are able to play samples at different pitches. The playback speed will determine the pitch of the played sample. Faster speeds play the sample at higher pitches, and lower speeds will play the sample at lower pitches. The sampler player module will show a visual representation of the loaded sample. When a note is played, we can see a line moving across the waveform graphic of the sample. This indicates which part of the sample is being played. Once again, at different pitches, the playhead is moving faster or slower. Faster for higher pitches and slower for lower pitches. When multiple notes are played, we can see that each played note is indicated graphically with its own playhead line. You can change where the samples will start its playback by changing the offset values here. The lock symbol next to the offset knob will lock the offset position to the current value when loading other samples. You can scale the output level, in other words, volume of the sample being played, by changing the percentage value under level at the bottom of Sampler's window. To the right of the level settings are the tuning settings. These settings can tune the sample being played. The semitone settings tune the sample pitch by semitone values, which are the musical values of the notes on a keyboard. The harmonics settings tune the sample by harmonics. These values multiply the frequency of the note being played by the set multiple value. The shift settings tune the sample by fixed frequency values. To the right of the tuning settings are the phase settings. The phase settings offset the phase of the played sample. The value on the left side sets the phase offset value, and the value on the right side sets the randomness of the phase offset. For more details on tuning settings and phase settings, you can watch the video on Phase Plant's analog oscillator, which also utilizes these same controls. Above the offset setting is the root setting. The root indicates the bass pitch the sample was recorded at. Knowing the root note of the original sample allows Faceplant to play the sample at the correct pitches when playing a note. When you change the root value settings, the note you play may not be the note that is sounding. When lowering the root value by 1 semitone, the note will play back with 1 semitone higher in pitch. When lowering the root value by 2 semitones, it will play a note 2 semitones higher, and so on. To be able to play the sample at the correct pitch, the fundamental frequency of the sample must be set. While you adjust the root pitch, below the sample window, 2 zoomed portions of the sample will appear, indicated by waveform graphics. You can use these graphics to help you tune the sample by eye. When the blue and the gray waveforms align, with 1 cycle in between the white bars, the sample is in tune. The lock symbol next to the root settings locks the root setting value when loading new samples. A common feature in sample players and synthesizers is looping. To allow looping of the played sample with Faceplant's sampler module, select Loop on the right side of the module's window. When you select Loop, the settings for the looping controls will appear below the sample window. Depending on how the controls are set, you may have the entire sample looping. Or you may set it so that only a portion of the sample loops. Without having this sample loop, the sample will stop playing once the playhead reaches the end of the sample. Commonly, looping will be used for sustain, which allows shorter samples to continue playing or sustaining while holding a note. The start control sets the start of the loop, and the length setting sets the length of the loop. As you adjust the length of the loop, you will see a zoomed-in waveform graphic portion of the sample around the loop start point and the loop end point, a gray waveform graphic, and a blue waveform graphic. You can use this visual feedback to find a seamless loop point by aligning the 2 waveforms. Holding the Shift key while dragging will allow for fine-tuning adjustments. To avoid clicks and pops when the loop wraps around, Faceplant supports crossfading across the loop boundary. The crossfade setting parameter adjusts the length of the crossfade region. You can select from different loop modes in the drop-down window to the left of the loop controls. Infinite will loop forwards forever. Sustain will loop forwards until you release the key and then keep playing without looping. Ping pong will alternate between playing the loop regions forwards and backwards. And reverse will play the loop only backwards. Selecting the lock symbol locks the loop to the current position when loading new samples. Faceplant's sampler module allows for Unison. On the right of the sampler module's window, you can select Unison. Unison will create duplicate voices of the sample being played. These added voices can then be detuned from each other in different ways, creating a fuller and lusher sound. When you select Unison, the controls for the Unison settings will appear below. The number on the left represents the number of Unison voices that will be added. To the right of the number of voices setting, you can choose in the drop-down menu different ways these added voices can be detuned from each other. Detune sets how much each voice will be detuned from each other. Spread sets the stereo spread of the voices. and blend sets the balance between the middle and side voices. The control knob to the right of blend will change its function depending on the unison mode you are using. Faceplant's manual explains each of the unison modes in detail. Selecting the graphic next to the sample file name will open the sample module's sample editor. The sample editor has basic functions for deleting parts or adjusting gain, but offers little in the way of changing the sounds. It is meant as a tool for organizing and cleaning up recordings rather than applying effects. On the left of the sample editor's window are the sample editor's tools. The selection tool doubles as a gain adjustment tool and provides options for creating fade-ins and fade-outs. Start by selecting a section of your sample. You can modify your selection by clicking and dragging the left and the right selection lines. For greater accuracy, you might want to zoom in on the edges of your selection. Once you are happy with your selection, simply move your mouse cursor over the selected area and 3 handles will appear. The middle handle adjusts the gain of the selection, while the 2 handles on the sides introduce a fade effect over the full section. Click and drag all these handles to modify the amount of gain change or the curvature of the fade. Below the selection tool is the pan tool. Click and drag the sample view to pan. You can also pan without the pan tool selected by dragging on either of the graph axis. Per default, the sample editor will show you both stereo channels overlaid, and if you modify your sample, you modify both channels equally. Using the stereo controls in the left-hand toolbar below the zoom tool, you can isolate the channels and make edits to just one channel at a time. In the upper right corner are the controls for the grid lines. Clicking the little magnet button next to the grid settings will enable grid snapping. The grid can help you make detailed selections by snapping your selections to the division lines. The top menu has some common actions available, like saving, copying, deleting, etc. It also has an operations menu with a few more audio-specific actions. Normalize will adjust the gain of your selection or the full sample if you have no selection, so that the highest peak will be set exactly at 0 dB. If a sample is unevenly biased towards positive or negative values, it is said to have DC or direct current. This often isn't audible, but can be a problem for multiple reasons. Remove DC will adjust your selection or the full sample if you have no selection to make sure it is evenly centered. Reverse will reverse your selection or the full sample if you have no selection. Depending on the sample you loaded, it might have stereo information or not. Convert to mono or stereo will either collapse your sample data to mono or duplicate it into 2 stereo channels.